There are rules to the road that you won't find in the handbook. Rule number 1, never stop at a diner that isn't on your GPS. I broke that rule on a lonely stretch of Nevada highway, and I learned that some detours don't lead back home. Buckle up. Part 1. The Detour. There is a specific kind of loneliness that only exists inside the cab of a Kenworth W900 at 3 in the morning. It's not the loneliness of an empty house or a quiet room. It's a kinetic loneliness. You're moving at 65 miles per hour through a world that has ceased to exist. The headlights cut a cone of yellow illumination into the black void, creating the world as you drive into it. And the moment you pass, the darkness swallows it back up again. For the last 20 years, I've preferred the dark. I prefer the hum of the 18 gears and the smell of diesel to the sound of human voices. My name is Cole, and I haul refrigerated freight, reefer loads, across the Nevada desert. It's a simple life. You keep the rubber side down, you keep the logbook legal, mostly, and you never, ever stop for a hitchhiker. That's rule number 1 of the road. Everyone knows it. But there are other rules. Older rules. The kind you don't find in the DOT handbook. Rules like never look into the cabin of a car that's been parked on the shoulder for too long because you might see someone looking back who hasn't blinked in 3 days. Rules like if you see a black dog running alongside your truck at highway speeds, you pull over and sleep immediately because the black dog is a hallucination that comes right before you drift into a bridge abutment. And the most important one, if you see a diner that isn't on your GPS, keep driving. Even if you're starving, even if your bladder is about to burst, even if the lights look warm and inviting, keep driving. I broke that rule on a Tuesday in November, and I've been paying for the meal ever since. I was hauling 40,000 pounds of frozen beef from Reno to Las Vegas. The I-95 is a lonely stretch of asphalt, a ribbon of gray laid over a dead ocean of sand and sagebrush. I knew every pothole, every mile marker, and every speed trap by heart. I was making good time, humming along to a classic rock station that was slowly losing its signal to the static of the wasteland. Then the radio cut out. It didn't fade. It snapped off. 1 second I was listening to Creedence Clearwater Revival. The next, dead silence. Not even the white noise of static. Just a vacuum. I frowned and tapped the head unit. "Piece of junk," I muttered. Then the GPS on my dash flickered. The map, which usually showed the straight blue line of the interstate, started to spin. The arrow representing my truck began to drift sideways, driving off the digital road and into the gray void of the screen. Then the screen went black. "Great," I sighed, rubbing my eyes. "Just great." I looked up through the windshield. The road ahead was blocked. It wasn't a subtle blockage. A wall of orange construction barrels was strung across the asphalt, their reflective tape gleaming aggressively in my high beams. Behind them, concrete Jersey barriers completely sealed off the highway. A large, illuminated construction sign, one of those portable LED trailers, sat on the shoulder. An arrow made of blinking orange dots pointed toward a narrow 2-lane blacktop that veered off into the desert darkness. Detour. The sign read, Route 9. I checked my mirrors. No traffic behind me. No traffic ahead. Just the vast, suffocating Nevada night. I had driven this route 100 times. There was no Route 9. There was no construction scheduled for this week. I picked up the CB radio mic. Breaker 19 for any southbound traffic. You guys seeing this blockade near mile marker 80? Over. Silence. No chatter. No truckers complaining about the delay. Just the empty hiss of the open channel. I downshifted, the engine growling as the jake brake kicked in. Brrr, bub, 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 and swung the massive rig onto the exit ramp. The suspension groaned as the tires left the smooth interstate and hit the rough, cracked pavement of the detour. Route 9 was bad. The asphalt was gray and pitted, like the skin of a dying elephant. Sagebrush clawed at the crumbling shoulders of the road, leaning in as if trying to snatch the tires. There were no streetlights, no reflectors, just the infinite black and the cone of my headlights. I drove for an hour without seeing a single sign of civilization. No houses, no gas stations, not even roadkill. The isolation started to seep into the cab. It felt heavy, like the air pressure had dropped. My stomach started to knot. I needed coffee. I needed to stretch. I needed to see another human being, just to prove I hadn't driven off the edge of the earth. Then, I saw the glow. It appeared on the horizon like a false sunrise, a dome of neon blue light that pulsed against the low clouds. As I got closer, the shape resolved itself. It was a diner, a classic chrome and glass Airstream-style joint sitting alone in the middle of the scrubland. It looked pristine, like it had been dropped from the sky 5 minutes ago. A neon sign buzzed and popped above the roof, the letters flickering with a rhythmic, electric heartbeat. The last stop. The parking lot was gravel and it was empty. No cars, no other trucks. Just the diner glowing like a radioactive isotope in the dark. I shouldn't have stopped. My gut told me to hammer down. My lizard brain, the part that kept our ancestors from being eaten by saber-toothed tigers, screamed at me that this was a trap. But the fatigue was heavy behind my eyes, and the promise of caffeine was a siren song I couldn't ignore. I pulled the rig into the lot, the gravel crunching loudly under the 18 wheels. I set the air brakes. Hiss thunk. I climbed out of the cab. The silence hit me first. No crickets, no wind, no distant highway noise, just the low, angry buzz of the neon sign. Zit, zit. I walked to the door. I noticed there were no moths swarming the porch light. In the desert, there are always moths. Here, nothing. I pushed the glass door open. A bell jingled, a cheerful tinny sound that felt violently out of place. Inside, the diner was impossibly clean. The black and white checkerboard floor gleamed as if it had just been waxed. The red vinyl booths looked brand new. And the smell, it was overwhelming. It smelled of bacon grease, fresh coffee, and cherry pie. But underneath that, there was something else. A faint metallic tang, like copper or old blood. But it wasn't empty. Sitting in the booth farthest from the door was an old man. He was wearing a gray suit that looked 3 sizes too big for him, the fabric bunched up around his shoulders like a collapsed tent. He was staring at a cup of black coffee, perfectly motionless. Behind the counter stood a waitress. She was young, maybe 20, with blonde hair tied back in a tight ponytail and a uniform that looked like it belonged in 1955, pastel pink with a white apron. "Sit anywhere, hun," she said. Her voice was cheerful, practiced, but her eyes didn't match. Her eyes were wide, fixed, and terrified. She was looking at me, but she wasn't seeing me. She was looking through me. At the door behind my back, I took a stool at the counter, placing my trucker hat on the formica. "Just coffee, black, and maybe a slice of pie if it's fresh." "Cherry pie is always fresh," she said. She reached for the coffee pot. I watched her hand. It was shaking violently. The pot rattled against the glass rim of the mug. Brown liquid sloshed over the side. She didn't react to the spill. She just kept pouring until the cup was full, then wiped the counter with a rag that looked stained. Not with coffee, with something darker. "Quiet night," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "I didn't even know this road was here. The detour sent me this way." The waitress froze. The rag in her hand stopped moving. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the sweat beading on her forehead, matting her hairline. "There is no detour," she whispered. I paused, the mug halfway to my lips. "Yeah, back on the 95. Big orange sign. Construction." She leaned in close. The smell of copper was stronger now. "Listen to me," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. "Drink the coffee. Do not eat the pie. Leave a tip. Get back in your truck. Do not look at the man in the booth. Do not look out of the windows until you are 5 miles away. Drive." "Lady, you're scaring me," I said, putting the mug down. "What's going on here? Is this some kind of cult thing?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "He's waiting for the bill," she said, her eyes darting to the old man in the gray suit. "He's been waiting for 40 years. If he finishes that coffee, we start over. You don't want to be here when we start over." I looked at the old man. He hadn't moved. He hadn't blinked. "Who is he?" "Just drive," she pleaded. She reached into her apron and pulled out a receipt. She slammed it face down on the counter. "Here's your check. Go. Now." My bladder felt full. Stress does that to me. Despite the terror, biology was calling. "I need to use the head first," I said, standing up. "No," she whispered. "Just leave." 2 minutes, I said. "Then I'm gone." I walked toward the back of the diner, past the swinging doors of the kitchen. Through the small circular window in the kitchen door, I saw the cook. He was a massive man, wearing a dirty white apron, facing away from me. He was chopping meat on a block. The cleaver rose and fell with a rhythmic thud, 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 but there was no meat on the block. He was chopping the wood. Splinters flew with every strike, and with every strike the cook twitched, a spasmodic jerk of his entire body. I hurried into the men's room and locked the door. The bathroom was stark white, 1 sink, 1 stall. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the feeling of dread. The water was freezing. It smelled like sulfur. I looked up into the mirror. My reflection was staring back at me, but it wasn't moving. I blinked. The reflection didn't blink. I waved my hand. The reflection stood still, hands gripping the sink, staring into my eyes with an expression of pure, unadulterated panic. Then the reflection spoke. Its lips moved, but I heard the words in my mind, not my ears. "They are in the tires, Cole." I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet. I hit the door, fumbled with the lock, and burst out into the hallway. I practically ran back to the counter. The waitress was gone. The kitchen was silent. The old man in the booth was standing up. He was facing me, but he had no face. Where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was just smooth, pale skin, like a thumb. But I heard his voice clearly, buzzing like a fly trapped in my skull. "The road is hungry, Cole, and you brought it dinner." I bolted. I slammed through the glass door, sprinting across the gravel to my truck. I didn't check the tires. I didn't do a walk-around. I scrambled up into the cab, my breath coming in jagged gasps, locked the doors, and twisted the key. The diesel engine roared to life. I released the brakes and hammered the throttle, spraying gravel as I tore out of the parking lot. I drove like a madman. I shifted gears without clutching, watching the speedometer climb. 60, 70, 80. The trailer swayed behind me, threatening to jackknife, but I kept my foot buried. I checked the odometer. I had driven 5 miles. "Okay," I gasped, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Okay, 5 miles. I can look." I checked the side mirrors. Nothing but darkness. Then I looked at the receipt the waitress had given me. I was still clutching it in my left hand. I smoothed it out against the steering wheel. It wasn't a receipt. It was a note, written in frantic, scrawled handwriting. "Don't let him pass you. If the high beams flash 3 times, crash the truck. It's better than where he takes you." I stared at the note. "Don't let who pass me." Then light flooded the cab. Blinding, white light reflected off every mirror. Someone was behind me, right on my bumper. I hadn't seen headlights approaching. There had been no glow on the horizon. 1 second darkness. The next, a supernova right behind my trailer doors. I squinted into the rearview mirror. The lights were too high for a car, too bright for a pickup. It was another semi. But the engine noise, that was the wrong part. My truck was loud, a roaring beast of diesel and steel, but the thing behind me was silent. There was no engine growl, no air brake hiss, just the sound of tires on pavement, a wet, sticky sound like meat being dragged across concrete. Slap, slap, slap. I pressed the accelerator to the floor. My rig was governed at 75, but gravity was helping me now. I hit 80. The truck behind me matched my speed perfectly. It didn't back off. It didn't try to pass. It just sat there, bathing me in that cold white light. Then the CB radio, the one that had been dead for hours, crackled to life. There was no static. The voice was crystal clear. It was deep, wet, and sounded like it was coming from inside my own throat. Breaker 19 for the Red Rock truck. You've got a tail light out, driver. I grabbed the mic, my hand shaking. Who is this? Back off. You're too close. I'm just inspecting the goods, Cole. The voice gargled. Frozen beef, 40,000 pounds, fresh, but not as fresh as you. I'm armed. I lied. I'll shoot out your tires. A laugh came over the speaker. It sounded like grinding gears. I don't have tires, Cole. Look closer. I looked in the side mirror again. The truck behind me moved slightly to the left, preparing to overtake. For a second, the headlights shifted, and I saw the silhouette of the rig. It wasn't a truck. It was a mass of writhing black shapes lashed together into the rough shape of a semi. It looked like a rolling mountain of charred wood and wet tar. And the wheels. The wheels were made of people, bodies curled into balls, interlocking spine to spine, rolling against the asphalt. I could see their faces as they spun, mouths open in a silent, endless scream. The headlights weren't bulbs. They were eyes. Giant, glowing, unblinking eyes set into the mass of the grill. It pulled into the passing lane. I swerved left, trying to cut it off. The trailer swung wildly, tires screeching. I blocked the lane. The entity behind me didn't brake. It rammed the back of my trailer. Boom. The impact threw me against the steering wheel. The truck shuddered violently. My speed dropped. You can't block the road, Cole. The voice on the radio whispered. The road goes where it wants. It hit me again. Boom. I looked at the fuel gauge. I had half a tank, enough to drive for hours. But the road ahead. The road wasn't straight anymore. The white lines on the asphalt began to weave. They twisted into spirals. The sagebrush on the side of the road grew instantly into towering, jagged spikes of bone. The sky above turned a sickly, bruised purple. The stars were gone, replaced by static. I was leaving reality. I was driving into the place the old man in the diner had come from. I looked at the note again. If the high beams flash 3 times, crash the truck. The eyes of the monster truck behind me blinked. Flash. Once. It pulled alongside me again. I looked out the driver's side window. The cab of the monster truck was even with mine. There was no driver, just a hollow, black interior filled with smoke. Flash. Twice. It began to drift into my lane. It was going to push me off the road, not into a ditch, but into the void. I gripped the wheel. I looked at the speedometer, 85 miles per hour. I looked at the jagged rock wall approaching on the right side of the canyon we had just entered. Flash. 3 times. Better than where you take me, I whispered. I screamed, closed my eyes, and yanked the steering wheel hard to the right. Part 2. The Toll Keeper's Garden. Pain has a specific taste. It tastes like copper pennies and airbag dust. It has a sound, too, a high-pitched ringing, like a tuning fork struck against the base of your skull, overlaying the wet hiss of a ruptured radiator. I woke up hanging upside down. The world was tilted on a 45-degree axis. The cab of the Kenworth was crushed on the passenger side. The steel frame crumpled like a soda can against the jagged rock wall of the canyon. My seatbelt was digging into my chest, a nylon vise crushing my ribs with every shallow breath I took. I gasped, sucking in air that felt too thick, too hot. Alive! I wheezed, the words scraping my throat. I'm alive! I fumbled for the buckle release with a hand that felt numb. It jammed. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I thrashed, kicking my legs against the steering column, but the belt held firm. I was trapped, a rat in a steel trap, waiting for the predator to come back and finish the job. I grabbed the utility knife from my belt, rule number 2 of the road, always carry a blade, and sawed frantically at the webbing. The serrated edge caught, tore, and then sliced through. I dropped. My shoulder hit the roof of the cab, which was now the floor, hard. I groaned, curling into a ball as a wave of nausea rolled over me. I lay there for a moment, listening. I expected to hear sirens. I expected to hear the passing swoosh of highway traffic. I heard nothing, not the silence of a quiet room, the silence of a vacuum, the silence of a grave after the dirt has been shoveled back in. I crawled over the shattered spiderweb of the windshield glass toward the driver's side window. It was smashed out. I squeezed through the opening, cutting my palm on a jagged shard, and tumbled out onto the ground. I expected asphalt. I expected the hard, cold surface of Route 9. My hands sank into gray dust. It was soft, like flour, and warm to the touch. It shifted under my weight, puffing up in small, suffocating clouds. I stood up, swaying, clutching my bruised ribs. I wiped the dust from my eyes and looked around. The road was gone. The canyon was gone. The Nevada desert was gone. I was standing in a vast, endless plain of gray ash. The ground stretched out in every direction, flat and featureless, rolling like a dead ocean. The sky above wasn't black anymore. It was a bruised, sickly purple, swirling with thick, oily clouds that churned in slow motion. There were no stars, just a single, massive moon, if you could call it that. It was a hole in the sky, a perfect circle of absolute nothingness, a black pupil staring unblinkingly at the world below, and the sagebrush I had seen right before the crash. They were bones. Towering, calcified ribs and femurs rose out of the ash like a forest of dead giants. They stretched up hundreds of feet, twisting and interlocking to form a canopy that blocked out the purple sky. The wind, which I couldn't feel on my skin, whistled through the hollow marrow of the bone trees, creating a low, mournful flute sound. Where? I coughed, the ash coating my tongue. Where the hell am I? I looked back at my truck. The trailer was twisted on its side, the Red Rock Logistics logo scraped and unrecognizable. The rear doors had burst open, but I couldn't see the cargo. The reefer unit, the refrigeration engine that should have been roaring, was silent and dead. Then I heard it. Slap, slap, slap. The sound of wet meat dragging on stone. I spun around, pressing my back against the wrecked chassis of my truck. About 200 yards away, sitting perfectly still in the ash, was the entity. The monster truck. It hadn't crashed. It had stopped. The writhing black mass that formed its chassis was settling, spreading out like melting tar in the sun. The wheels, the balls of human bodies, were unraveling. The people who made up the tires were untangling themselves, crawling out of the wheel wells. They were naked, their skin gray and hairless, their mouths fused shut with scar tissue. They didn't stand up. They just lay in the ash, writhing, waiting. And the driver, the hollow smoke in the cab. It was pouring out of the window, a thick, black oil that defied gravity. It pooled on the ash, rising up, taking shape. It formed a silhouette of a man, a giant, 10 feet tall, made of darkness and sludge. It turned its head toward me. It didn't have a face, just 2 high-beam headlights where its eyes should be. Flash. They blinked. Once. I didn't think. I ran. I scrambled away from the wreck, plunging into the forest of giant bones. The ash made footing difficult. It was like running in deep, dry snow. My boots sank with every step, kicking up clouds of gray dust that choked me. Behind me, I heard a sound that chilled my blood. A horn, but not a truck horn. It sounded like a choir of screaming voices, blasted through a distortion pedal at maximum volume. I ran until my lungs burned. I wove between the massive rib cages of the bone trees, dodging femurs the size of redwood trunks. The air here was heavy, smelling of ozone, sulfur, and something sweet, like rotting flowers. Suddenly I tripped. My boot caught on something hard buried in the ash. I went down face first, tasting the grit. I scrambled up, spitting out dust, and looked at what I had tripped over. It was a bumper, a chrome bumper, half buried, gleaming dully in the purple light. I fell to my knees and dug with my bare hands. It was the front end of a 1950s sedan, a Chevy Bel Air, rusted, crushed, ancient. I looked around. Now that I was looking for them, I saw them everywhere. Cars, trucks, motorcycles, campers, thousands of them, half buried in the ash like forgotten toys in a sandbox. It was a graveyard of vehicles that had taken the detour. I walked past a family station wagon with wood paneling, a just married sticker peeled from the rear window. I wiped the dust from the driver's side glass and peered in. There were skeletons inside, but they weren't sitting in the seats. They were fused into the upholstery. The leather of the seats had grown over their bones, merging man and machine into one twisted sculpture. The driver's skeletal hands were fused to the steering wheel, the finger bones becoming the spokes. I stumbled back, sickened. A few yards away, I saw the cab of a flatbed truck protruding from the ash. The door was open. On the seat lay a leather-bound logbook, preserved by the dry air. I picked it up. The pages were brittle. I opened to the last entry. The date was October 14th, 1974. Log entry, 0300 hours. Past a diner called The Last Stop. Good coffee. Waitress looked scared. Left the lot, and now the road won't end. I've been driving for 3 days. The sun hasn't come up. The radio is just screaming now. I'm going to pull over and sleep. If I sleep, maybe I'll wake up in Kansas. Underneath the entry, in shaky, jagged letters, was scrawled one final line. The pavement has teeth. I dropped the book. He never woke up. I whispered. No, he didn't. The voice came from beneath the chassis of an overturned cement mixer. I jumped, spinning around, raising my utility knife. Who's there? A hand reached out from the shadows, a small trembling hand. Help me, the voice whispered. I approached slowly. Huddled in the dirt, protected by the curve of the cement drum, was the waitress, the girl from the diner. Sarah. She looked worse than before. Her pink uniform was torn at the shoulder, stained with the black oil. Her blonde hair was matted with ash. One of her eyes was swollen shut, purple and bruised. You, I gasped, dropping to my knees beside her. How are you here? I tried to run, she wept, pulling her knees to her chest. When you ran, the manager, he got angry. He threw me out. He said my shift was over. The manager, the old man. He's not a man, she shivered. He's the toll keeper. This is his garden. Route 9 isn't a place, Cole. It's a digestive tract. It eats travelers. It eats the lost. And it eats the people who try to warn them. The ground shook. Thump, thump, thump. Dust rained down from the bone trees above us. The entity was getting closer. We have to keep moving, I said, grabbing her arm. Come on. There's nowhere to go, she screamed, pulling away. Look around you. This is the end of the line. You drive until you run out of gas or until you crash. Then you wait. You wait until the ash covers you or until he comes to collect the parts he needs. I am not dying in a junkyard, I snarled. I have a family. I have a daughter in Reno. Everyone here had a family, Sarah whispered, gesturing to the sea of buried cars. That Winnebago over there, a family of 5. They took the detour in 1999. Now they are just spare parts for the road. She pointed to a tire lying near us. I looked closely. The rubber wasn't rubber. It was skin. Blackened, hardened human skin stretched painfully over a steel rim. I could see a tattoo, a faded anchor distorted on the tread. My boyfriend, she whispered, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. He drove a Mustang. He ran out of gas 3 years ago. The manager, he needed new tires for the rig. He peeled him. He peeled him while he was still screaming. Bile rose in my throat. I swallowed it down. Fear was useless now. Only anger remained. Cold, hard anger. "He's not peeling me," I said. "And he's not peeling you." "He's coming," she whimpered. The shadow of the oil giant fell over the graveyard. The headlight beams mounted in its skull, cut through the gaps in the wreckage, scanning like searchlights in a prison yard. The beams swept over the station wagon, then the cement mixer. "Stay here," I told her. "No, don't leave me." "I'm not leaving you. I'm ending this." I crawled out from the other side of the chassis. My wrecked Kenworth was about 50 yards away, lying on its side like a wounded beast. The entity was between me and the truck, stomping through the wreckage, crushing the roofs of old sedans with its massive, oily feet. I needed a distraction. I needed to turn that monster around. I picked up a loose piece of scrap metal, a rusty muffler pipe, and hefted it. It was heavy, solid. I hurled it as hard as I could into the bone forest, away from my truck. Clang, crash. The sound echoed through the silent plain. The entity spun around. The headlight beams swung wildly toward the noise. The choir horn blasted again, shaking the ground. It took a step toward the noise, investigating. I ran. I sprinted toward my overturned truck. My ribs screamed in protest, a jagged lance of pain with every stride. I slipped on the ash, scrambled up, and kept going. I reached the trailer. The reefer unit was smashed, twisted metal hanging loose. But the fuel tank, a small 50-gallon aluminum drum attached to the underside, was intact. I fell to my knees beside it. I twisted the cap. It wouldn't budge. "Come on," I grunted, straining. "Come on, you piece of junk!" The metal shrieked and gave way. The cap spun off. The smell of red diesel hit me. It smelled like chemicals and power. It smelled like the only weapon I had left. I ripped a long strip of fabric from my flannel shirt. I shoved one end deep into the tank, letting it soak up the fuel. "Hey!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. The entity stopped. It turned its massive, oily body back toward me. The headlight eyes blinded me, searing my retinas. "You want the load?" I yelled, standing by the fuel tank, the lighter in my hand. "You want the beef? Come and get it." The entity roared. It wasn't a mechanical sound anymore. It was a biological, hungry sound, a sound of 1,000 stomachs growling at once. It charged. The ground shook as it ran. The ash flew up in waves. I pulled out my lighter, a cheap yellow plastic Bic lighter I bought at a truck stop in Reno for $1.99. I flicked it. Nothing, just sparks. "No," I whispered. The entity was closing in the distance. 40 yards. It swiped a car out of its way, sending the vehicle flying through the air. I flicked it again. Click, spark. No flame. "Come on," I begged. "Please." 30 yards. I could smell the oil now. Rancid, ancient oil. I could feel the heat radiating off its black skin like an open oven door. I flicked it again. Whoosh. A tiny, beautiful yellow flame danced in the purple darkness. I held it to the rag. The diesel fumes caught instantly. A blue-orange flame shot up the fabric wick, racing toward the tank. "Eat this," I whispered. I turned and dove. I scrambled behind a massive boulder of obsidian rock, curling into a ball, covering my head with my arms just as the entity lunged for the truck. Kaboom! The explosion wasn't just fire. It was a release of pressure. The reefer tank blew, igniting the vapor, and the shockwave ruptured the main fuel tanks of the truck. A fireball the size of a house erupted, engulfing the entity, the wreckage, and the sky. The force of the blast lifted me off the ground and threw me backward. I hit the ash hard, rolling, tumbling. The world turned white, then ringing silence. I lay there, staring up, unable to move. The sky was breaking. The explosion had torn a hole in the illusion. The purple clouds were ripping apart like burning paper. Through the cracks in the sky, I saw something that made me weep. Stars. Real stars. Orion. The Big Dipper. The cold, indifferent, beautiful stars of the Nevada desert. The ash around me began to swirl. The bone trees dissolved into mist. The graveyard of cars faded like a bad dream. I felt a pulling sensation, like a hook behind my navel, dragging me backward through deep water. I saw the waitress, Sarah, standing in the fading mist. She wasn't bruised anymore. She was smiling. She waved. Then the darkness took me. "Driver! Hey, driver!" A bright light shone in my eyes. Not headlights. A mag light. I gasped, jerking awake. My body spasmed, fighting restraints that weren't there. I was sitting upright. My hands were gripping a steering wheel. My knuckles were white. I blinked, shielding my eyes from the glare. A police officer was standing on the running board of my truck, shining a light into the cab through the open window. "You okay in there, son?" the officer asked, his voice full of concern. I looked around. I was in my truck. The windshield was intact. The cab wasn't crushed. The smell of bacon grease and sulfur was gone, replaced by the smell of old coffee and pine air freshener. I looked out the window. I was parked on the shoulder of the I-95. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the desert in pink and gold. The orange construction barrels were gone. There was no detour. My voice was hoarse, like I had swallowed a cup of sand. The crash. The diner. "You've been parked here for about 4 hours, the officer said, stepping down. "We checked your log. You were due for a rest break, but you're parked pretty close to the white line. Just wanted to make sure you weren't having a medical episode. You were screaming in your sleep." I touched my chest. My ribs didn't hurt. I looked at my clothes. No ash, no oil, no blood. "I'm fine," I stammered, shaking my head. Must have just dozed off hard. Nightmare. A bad one. "All right, well, get moving. Traffic picks up in an hour. Stay safe, driver." The officer walked back to his cruiser, the gravel crunching under his boots, a sound that made me flinch. I sat there for a long time listening to the idle of the engine, the rhythmic thrum, thrum, thrum of the diesel. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "Crazy," I whispered. "You're going crazy, Cole. Highway hypnosis. Too much caffeine." I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. I drove for another 100 miles. The sun came up fully. The world was normal. The radio played classic rock. The GPS worked perfectly. I reached the distribution center in Las Vegas around noon. I backed the trailer into the dock, hitting the yellow lines perfectly. The foreman, a guy named Mike, walked out with his clipboard. He looked annoyed. "You're late, Cole," Mike grunted. "We expected this load at 0800. Traffic?" "Something like that," I said, climbing out of the cab. My legs felt shaky. "Sorry, Mike. Had a rough night." "All right, pop the back. Let's check the temp. If that beef thawed, it's coming out of your paycheck." I walked to the back of the trailer. I unlatched the heavy steel doors. They swung open with a rusty screech. I expected to see pallets of boxed beef. I expected to see the cold mist of the reefer unit. I froze. The trailer was empty of beef. There were no pallets, no boxes, no cargo. Instead, the floor of the trailer was covered in orange construction barrels. Hundreds of them, crushed and flattened, stacked to the ceiling like trophies. And sitting on top of the barrels, right at the edge of the trailer, was a plate. A white ceramic diner plate. On the plate was a slice of cherry pie. A fork was stuck into it. It was still steaming, and underneath the plate was a receipt. I picked it up with trembling fingers. The paper felt warm. It wasn't a receipt for food. It was a bill of lading. Cargo, one soul, Sarah J. Waitress. Destination released. Status delivered. Payment accepted. I stared at the receipt, my breath catching in my throat. Then I looked at the passenger seat of my truck through the open door. Sitting there, folded neatly on the seat, was a pink waitress uniform with a white apron. It was clean. No blood. No oil. I looked into the side mirror one last time. Far behind me, in the reflection of the distribution center lot, I saw a black dog sitting by the gate. It wasn't running. It was sitting, watching me. It looked up. It had high beam headlights for eyes. It winked. The end. Check your mirrors, watch the tree line, and if you see a black dog running alongside your car, don't look it in the eye. If you survived the ride, leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next shift. Drive safe.